Another Dead Teenager, a Paul Turner Mystery, Book 3. Author, Mark Richard Zubro. Stonewall Inn Mysteries. Narrator, Eric Aust. Ian entertained Turner with newspaper gossip as they drove to Genesee Depot, one of Ian's favorite eating spots on the north side. They sat in a booth near the window so they could look out. The unhurried atmosphere and the classical music playing softly soothed Turner's nerves. The meal passed mostly in silence. Ian recognized that what his friend needed was companionship. When dessert arrived, Ian announced, "The Goldstein and Douglas's deaths have no connection to being gay." "That I agree with." "Did you talk to Purple Steve?" "We did." "Who is that jerk?" "He has a Ph.D. in philosophy from either Yale or Harvard. I forget which. Besides working part-time at the Leather Strap, he answers the phones at some sleazy hotel in Halstead Street. It's an establishment that caters to the lost and lonely. A hustler hotel. How nice for him. He was trying to hustle the cops and the media for his 15 minutes of fame. He'll be lucky if we don't run his ass in. Fenwick may simply ram Steve's head through the nearest wall if he ever sees him again. Probably wouldn't hurt. Steve near enough. Nobody else who works there saw the kids. The bouncer insists he never lets anyone in who's underage." "They may actually be true. Lately, the vice division of your department has been hanging around there. They've had to be careful. I interviewed Purple Steve. And now you're best friends. At first, he claimed every word he told the cops was true, but I'm a wily old reporter. I dig out little secrets. Seems our buddy, Steve Smith, has an outstanding prostitution warrant from another jurisdiction." "You're making this up." "They're your word." "How'd you find out?" "Sources. So you know something rotten about him." "I mentioned it to him. Told him if he didn't come clean, I would announce that little fact to every media outlet in the city and to every cop I could get my hands on." At that point, the truth slipped from his lips. The dumb shit made it all up. "If I had the energy, I'd have him arrested. If I see his face on another television station, I will have him arrested. I may anyway. Be my guest. Even if it means breaking a trust and giving up a source." "He's not a source. He's a poor asshole who screwed up big time. If stupidity is a crime, he's guilty. He wasted a lot of people's time today, so lock him up." "Not at the moment." Turner told his friend about the case. He wasn't worried about giving privileged information to Ian. His friend knew how to keep his mouth shut, and he was an ex-cop. Ian might have insights they'd missed. Turner trusted Ian's instincts. "That stuff about crushed testicles is odd," Ian said. "You know that gay suicide stuff I've been working on?" Turner nodded. "Remember I told you about the interview I was going to have with that woman from Spokane, Washington? I mentioned it the night I babysat." "Yeah, you said you were having breakfast with the coroner or something. Assistant deputy coroner who helped with the autopsy." "Right, whatever. I try and track all those kinds of things down. Trouble is, most of the time the family won't talk, and I wouldn't want to bother them at such an awful moment. That's trash journalism. Usually, I can't get the officials to tell me much either." "So what did this one tell you?" Turner asked. "I think I've got the start of something. The kid was one of the biggest sports heroes ever to hit town. This was maybe 9 years ago. It made the national papers. She was really good to talk to. First time I've got an official who dealt with that kind of case to open up to me. She told me that no one could figure out why he'd want to commit suicide, and that she was sure this kid didn't kill himself." "No. How'd they figure that out?" "Wasn't there a note or something?" "She told me the cops said there was a lot of depressing poetry the kid wrote. Everybody figured a sports kid who wrote poems had to be gay. But nobody in the press reported that. The woman I talked to found something really strange. She wouldn't tell me anything over the phone at the time without a release from the family." "Did she succumb to your fatal charm in person?" "No, she quit her job and was going to work someplace else. Denver, I think. I found out she was a lesbian, and we knew people each other knew in several activist causes." "So what'd you learn?" "The kid had been hanged, but they also found his dick and balls had been crushed, as if they'd been pulverized with a baseball bat. The killer did it after he strung him up." It was murder. Did she report that at the time? Her bosses and the family didn't want to hear about it, but the cops looked into it. They never found a suspect or probable cause or anything. They wrapped it up as a suicide and let it go. You say this is the same killer? All I know for sure is that it's not going to help my suicide theory or get me any closer to writing a Pulitzer Prize article on gay suicide. But as a cop, do you believe in coincidences? No. But your killing was 9 years ago. I said, I don't believe in coincidences. These have to be connected. Maybe there were others. Others what? Kids who were sports stars, killed under unusual circumstances, who all got their nuts crushed. I wouldn't want to be the one to bring that theory up to my boss, although this one is better than the total zero we have now. I bet your dead guy was in Spokane years ago. This is Chicago today. That's a hell of a stretch. Why'd the killer move? Gee, gosh, not to get caught. Sarcasm does not become you. You're losing it, Ian. A serial killer after star sports kids who roams around the country. Serial killers move around. It's part of the profile. This is a serial killer. I have my doubts. How many cop hours did you waste on Purple Steve? Too many. This has more possibilities than that. Not by much. Does your theory really make sense to you? Nothing about this killing makes sense, but if it was random violence, it was well planned random violence. You haven't been able to get any angle on why these two kids would be killed. No one has a motive. Nothing you found in their lives leads to somebody killing them. No one they knew had a motive. You keep coming up with nothing because there is nothing. This, at least, would be something. Wouldn't somebody have noticed if there were an unusual number of deaths of kids who were sports stars? Turner asked. I don't know, Ian said, and neither do you. But if you don't follow it up and later it turns out to be true, you'll never let me hear the end of it. Turner paused. It could be true. We are desperate for leads. Maybe I'll get that Pulitzer after all, Ian said. Maybe you'll get your butt in gear and help us with the research. Turner stood up. Where are you going? I'm going to check out. How? It's 8 o'clock. What do you plan to check? If other sports stars have died. And if their balls have been crushed? Would most places know that? I'll find out, Turner said. Turner called Fenwick at home from a payphone. His partner was as skeptical as he, but willing to listen and to help do research. Fenwick met Ian and Turner on the 4th floor of Area 10 headquarters half an hour later. Turner was halfway through his explanation to Blessing when the young cop held up his hand. Already done. Huh? Turner said. Routine to this kind of thing. One of the first things I did when we got all the computer stuff hooked up was get into the NCAVC and VICAP. Too many cops wait too long to get into those systems. NCAV was the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime, and VICAP, the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. Both were under the aegis of the FBI. Any police department could feed in data or use the data that was stored in the system to help them solve crimes committed in their jurisdiction. So what do they say? Fenwick asked. We got no match in method of operation. What we've got here is fairly unique. What about testicles being crushed? Turner asked. I sent that through. Let me check. He tapped computer keys for half a minute. No crushed testicles, Blessing said. Must not be a common method of execution for serial killers, Turner said. I still think it's a possibility, Ian said. Fenwick said, it's not something they're going to look for. The one you had, Ian, was from before they began to set up the system, and you only found out because you had a connection. I bet there are others. There got to be others. You'd have to do the research on your own, Blessing said. Do you know how many teenagers die each year in this country? No, Turner admitted. Thousands. You can't eliminate suicides or accidents from any search, because the killer might have disguised them. It would take forever. You got to start somewhere, Ian said. I'll help for a while, Turner said. But if we don't turn up something quickly, Blessing sighed. We can get some of the newspapers on computer, but For background research, you'll have to do it yourself. Ian suggested the main branch of the Chicago Public Library, as the most likely to have national newspapers on file. At 9 o'clock, they rode over. They entered by a side entrance and presented their identification to the head of security, who agreed to let them in. They walked across terrazzo floors and strode up silent escalators. Turner thought the maple wood used throughout made it seem like the library he'd used as a kid. At the periodicals desk on the third floor, Turner said, "We need to check the national news and the sports sections of each of these papers." He took the New York Times, and the Chicago Tribune, and Fenwick, USA Today. "Where do we start?" Fenwick asked. "With the most recent, and work back." Ian said, "Anytime you find something with a sports star killed, make several copies of it." One of the security guards showed them how to use the machines. "They should copy everything that has something to do with teenagers dying under accidental or unexplained circumstances." Turner said, "Maybe that won't list stuff about playing sports." "Okay," Ian said. "It'll take forever," Turner said. "If necessary, we can get an army of cops in here and find every teenage killing this century," Fenwick said. After an hour, the newsprint that whirled by began to blur together. Turner had to force himself to concentrate. Eventually, he got into a rhythm of where to look in the Times. But by 11, he was exhausted. He managed to get the security guards to unbend enough to let them bring coffee up to where they were working. At 11:30, the three of them met at one of the blonde wooden tables. Fenwick's stack of copies was the largest. These state-by-state national pages have a few dead teenager things, but mostly accidents, Fenwick said. "I have 15 of those, but I've only gone back 3 years. From the sports pages, I have 3 reports, 1 last year and 2 from 2 years ago." He gave them the copies. "Do you have any that match what Fenwick has?" Turner asked. Before leafing through their stacks of materials, they arranged all of what they had by date. Then they tried cross-matching. "What are we looking for?" Ian asked. "A cluster of items that look suspicious," Turner said. Ian said, "But if the killer made the one in Spokane look like a suicide, maybe he or she is clever enough to make all of them look like suicides or even accidents. How can you possibly find out if they're murders at this point? Whichever one of us is the biggest fairy gets to wave the magic wand," Turner said. "Leave me out of discrimination," Fenwick said. "Everybody kept all accidents and suicides?" Turner asked. They all nodded. "Let's see if we can get any kind of pattern or grouping besides chronological," Turner said. They made 3 copies of their findings, so each one had a stack of items to hunt through. For 15 minutes, they perused their separate stacks. Finally, Turner looked up. "This is goofy. You've just got a list of dead teenagers. You're not going to get a pattern. These papers would never have all the deaths we'd need to check. In this state alone, there's a zillion little local papers to hunt through." "A prominent athlete would be noticed," Ian said. "This is useless," Turner said. "You remember what the last tip we got was before Purple Steve?" Fenwick asked. Turner nodded. Ian shook his head. "What?" "It took 4 cops all afternoon to check. Call came from O'Hare Airport. Some obscure high school sport team was passing through the city for some playoffs in Peoria. Somebody reported one of the kids missing and a suspicious passenger on the plane. We had to track the passengers, half the employees of the airline and the airport, and my great aunt Matilda. The suspicious guy turned out to look like an unreconstructed Tippy, who was a rocket scientist who has been in Russia for the past 3 years. They found the kid still mostly drunk, but working on becoming very hungover, back in East Nowhere, Iowa. What we've got here has at least as much possibility as that did of making a connection. We can't abandon it." "Maybe we haven't gone back far enough," Turner said. "I'm willing to keep looking for a while longer." Fenwick nodded. "Although we could leave this for uniformed cops to compile," Turner said. "I'm staying," Ian said. They returned to work. Just after 1 a.m., Fenwick's bellow broke the silence. Turner hurried down the aisle to see what was up. He met Ian and Fenwick at the end of a row of periodicals. Fenwick was waving a piece of paper in his hand. "I've got it," he said. "It better be pretty goddamn mind-boggling at this point," Turner said. "2 sports stars in Tucson, Arizona, back 6 years ago. Look." They read the article. "There was a follow-up," Fenwick said. "There wasn't with most of these." He showed them the next article. There had been a traffic accident, first reported as 2 athletes coming home from a party, probably drunk, who had driven off a dark country road in the mountains. The follow-up article said that one of their friends had come forward after a week and admitted he'd followed his buddies with his lights off. He was going to sneak up on them and use his dad's volunteer fire department emergency lights to scare the hell out of them. Before he could catch up, he'd seen a car trying to shove the other vehicle off the road. He'd witnessed his buddy's car fly off the road, plunge down the hillside, and burst into flames. He, too, had been drunk from the teenage trysting in the hills above the city, but had quickly become sober and very frightened. He was afraid the other car might be waiting and that he, too, might be run off the road. He'd been afraid to come forward, thinking that he might be blamed or get in trouble for being at the party for which he'd been grounded from going. The cops had tended to discount the boy's story, but they examined the burned and wrecked vehicle again. It was impossible to determine whether any of the cracks and dents on the boy's car had come from the plunge or from being sideswiped. But an enterprising young Tucson cop had found an abandoned car that had been reported stolen. The car had slender lines of paint that could have come from sideswiping another vehicle. A quick check showed them to be the same color as the car that had crashed and burned. The abandoned car had been reported stolen in Phoenix. A week before the crash, the owner of the vehicle had over 300 witnesses to where he was on the night of the accident. No suspect had been apprehended. "No crushed nuts," Turner said. "You really think this is connected? Compared to the leads we've gotten on some cases, this is fabulous," Fenwick said. "Did you look at some of the calls we've gotten on this case?" One claimed Goldstein and Douglas were murdered by aliens from Mars who came to Earth to eat the livers of teenagers. "I thought the teenage liver eaters came from Venus." Turner held up his hand to forestall his protest. "Tucson teens murdered" is a lovely headline, but I don't see much of a connection here. "Waverly, the football player, was from Spokane," Fenwick said. "So are lots of people," Turner said. "Doesn't mean they're killers, but we better run a complete profile on this guy. If he lived in Tucson." "I want to talk to these people," Fenwick said. "The kid, the cops, the medical examiner, everything." "They're all in bed by now," Ian said. "Or does their sleep get to be ruined?" "You're usually out haunting bars." "Well, past this hour," Turner said. "Investigative journalism," Ian said. "Amazing what you can find attached to a beer bottle," Turner said. "If it's handsome and delectable, it's in-depth research," Fenwick said. "We can assign people to keep looking through these. Plus, we should try and match up anything else we found in the last couple hours. I, however, am not going to pursue it tonight. I'm going to get a few hours sleep. We need more than just us on this." "Do we have something?" Ian asked. "I sure as hell hope so," Turner said. Paul enjoyed the fact that he could go home and crawl into bed next to Ben. His lover woke briefly as Paul joined him. 4 hours later, Paul awoke from the alarm, more energetically than he had any time since the case began. He even found Brian's broccoli and cauliflower omelet edible. His elder son had been on a health food kick since he read in an article that one of his sports heroes ate 10 different helpings of vegetables a day. Paul balked at the fried zucchini that accompanied the omelet, but his sons devoured all of it. He saw them off to school, talked with Ben for a few minutes, grabbed a large-scale map of the United States from Jeff's room, and rushed to work. He found Fenwick in the task force room pinning a huge map of the United States to the floor-to-ceiling corkboard. Turner showed his to Fenwick. "Great minds run in the same rut," Fenwick said. Turner pulled a package of multicolored pens out of his sport coat pocket. He took the sheaf of papers they'd found last night out of his briefcase. "Let's get somebody to put these on the locations of everything we found last night. As the information comes in, we can pin each city." Might make a pattern. The commander entered the room. His shoulders sagged, and it seemed to take a great effort for him to get his coffee cup to his lips for a brief sip. What now? Turner and Fenwick explained their ideal. Not only that, Turner said, we can get each incident on computer. We'll be able to cross-match them easier than that way. We can set up a grid by part of the country, city, type of accident, types of injuries. Sports, kids, involved, kind of sport, everything. Color of eyes, of victims, whatever. When we talk to the different departments, we can get any suspicions, anomalies, quirks, and then we can try and check autopsy reports. I'd like to talk to witnesses, members of the family if possible. We can begin cross-matching all the data. If there's a serial killer out there, maybe we can find a pattern. Sounds kind of off the wall to me, the commander said. Better than some of the other crap we have, Fenwick said. Take forever, the commander said. Fenwick glanced at the people slowly filtering into the office. We've had nearly 75 people running around this city like chickens with their heads cut off. Many on crap. Lots more impossible than this. We've got computers. We've got communications. I think we can get this stuff. You can get it, the commander said. But will it do any good? I think the testicles of the dead kid here and in Spokane being crushed has real possibilities. Turner said it could be the same killer. He repeated Ian's warning of the night before. If it is the same killer, and we ignore it now, we're in for criticism later, Fenwick added. And if we're right, we look great. The commander sipped coffee. Okay, for a while. Go with it for 48 hours. If nothing comes of it by then, drop it, and don't put everybody on this. Keep following up on any leads in this area at the same time. He sipped more coffee. Buck, I talked to the superintendent about you yesterday. Mr. Odell did call him. It's only good news if I've been fired. No such luck. You'll be around to work on lots more cases, but you've made a mortal enemy of Stuart Odell. What are they going to do? Slap me with a regulation? He's a bureaucrat. He'll do something mean and nasty, and probably sneaky to get revenge. I'd watch my back if I were you. Fenwick nodded. He'd been around long enough to know that a direct assault from an enemy in the police department was unlikely. Nothing to do for now but get on with the job. They dispatched 15 people to the library to collect more data. They assigned 20 people to begin making follow-up calls. Turner and Fenwick rearranged work assignments on the chart next to their desks on the 3rd floor. 12 people were at computer terminals on the 4th floor. They sent 6 uniforms to police headquarters at 11th and State to pick up more hardware. By 10, not counting the people handling the routine calls for the task force, they had 75% of their people working on some aspect of the new lead. At 11, a contingent returned from the library. They had expanded the search to other national newspapers. They dumped boxes of copies. More people were assigned to arrange them by date and area of the country. They sent out for more pins to be set into cities and towns on the huge map. Task force members took the basic data and typed the details of each incident onto the computers, using the 42 categories that Turner and Fenwick had agreed on with Blessing. Between ordering the task force in this new direction, Turner and Fenwick began to make calls on the most likely cases. Turner called the county coroner for Tucson, Arizona at 9:30 a.m. Arizona time. She remembered the case clearly. One of the boys was burned beyond recognition, she said. The other was thrown from the car, which then rolled over him and set him on fire. Crushed all the bones on the right side of his body. I've got kind of a strange question. Turner explained the murder they were working on, and the anomaly of the testicles of one of the boys being crushed, and the lack of underwear on the victim. I think I'd remember that, she said. Although, honestly, I don't know if we checked. It was pretty obvious what killed both boys. Wouldn't the killer have had to park, walk down the mountain, do this dirty work, and get back up, risking somebody seeing him hanging around the crash, or especially the fire? At the moment, it's the only lead I've got, Turner said. I'll have to look it up and get back to you, she said. He called the Tucson Police Department. The detective assigned to the case said, It was a horrible mess. 2 of the nicest kids. They'd just had a big write-up in the paper. A couple of months before the accident. Best baseball players we ever had around here. Each one a prospect for the majors. Lots of attention from the scouts. Anything unusual about the home life? Nice enough kids. One was kind of arrogant about all the attention he got. His folks were pretty well off, but the other kid was from an ordinary middle-class part of town. Turner asked about the state of the bodies. They knew nothing about genitals being crushed, and no one had noticed the absence of underwear. At 12:05, Fenwick slammed his phone down and gave a shout. "We've got crushed nuts in Odessa, Texas." Fenwick and Turner marched up to Blessing's desk on the 4th floor. Fenwick said, "Match every case we've got against ours here. The one in Spokane, Washington, and this one in Odessa, Texas. See if any profiles begin to match. The more matches you get, put them to the top of the pile for follow-up phone calls." On the way to Aunt Millie's Bar and Grill for lunch, Fenwick gave Turner the details about the Odessa case. Kid from the local basketball team got stabbed. Found by a custodian at center court of the basketball gym first thing one morning. Sometime during the night, the school had been broken into and the kid killed. They still haven't figured out why or how the boy got lured into the school. Coroner recorded 111 stab wounds. Kid must have looked like a ghastly pincushion. Got a profile on the dead boy? Low grades, bad attitude, hell of a basketball player. Been in trouble with school authorities and the police, but could play basketball like a dream. Why not just cut off his testicles? Turner asked. Huh? Picture it, Turner said. The killer is stabbing this guy long after he's dead. Killer must have blood all over himself, but has also brought along a convenient blunt instrument that he then applies to the kid's balls. Makes sense to you? And he got to carry the knife, blunt, what's this, and get the kid to follow along. How did he lure him there, and did the kid have his underwear? Don't know about the luring part, but the kid did have his underwear on. Shit. Well, you can't expect a serial killer to be perfect every time. I don't like the different methods of killing, Turner said. But crushing their nuts has got to be a connection. It's just too obvious. Fenwick parked the car, turned off the engine, let out a whoosh of breath and said, "The only thing to do at this point is eat lunch." A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.